everyone, Heather here. I am back with another little tutorial. We're going to do a kind of a princess edit, fairy tale edit on this image here for this little girl. So I did start with doing a few adjustments in Lightroom. All I did was played around with the greens a bit. They were very green. It was midsummer when I took this photo. So I just kind of wanted to tone that green down slightly. And I might even do it a little bit more. We're kind of going to play around with this photo today. I didn't really come into this tutorial with a huge plan, so we'll see how it goes. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to start with is to make a new copy, and I'm going to take this background layer and I'm going to drag it down. Oh, if it will select it. There we go. Drag it down to the little plus sign. And I think I'm going to open it up into Camera Raw Filter. It's very close to Lightroom, and I'm just going to play around with those greens even more, and it'll give you an idea of what I did in Lightroom before opening this photo up into Photoshop. Alright, so here the image is up in Camera Raw, and when it comes up, you're going to have all the same dialog boxes as you would in Lightroom when you open it. So you have your basics, which is your white balance, your exposure, your clarity. I guess this would be sort of like a sharpening, and vibrance and saturation right here. You will also have your curves panel, which is also in Lightroom. You have your details like your sharpening. This panel is a little lower down in your Lightroom when you open it. But then you also have your color mixer, which has the HSL adjustments, which is what I'm going to play around with. So I'm actually going to bring it up into hue, and I'm just going to play and see if I want to lower the greens even more with this image. And I feel like I'm liking that. And so the reason I wanted to do this on a background copy is because if I open it back up into Photoshop and I decide not liking that so much, simple to fix it, you just delete that layer. So I like to work on a lot of layers, so that's what I would suggest that you should do as well. One other thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring the orange up a little bit more. That'll brighten up her skin slightly, and I might just bring the vignetting in a little bit more as well. Alright, so let's see if we like those adjustments that we just made. So this is the before. This is the before right here. I like the greens, but I kind of like how this is a little less dramatic of color. I like the kind of orangey warm tones that we have going on, so I think I'm going to stick with this. Now the next thing that I would do is make another copy of this layer. So I'm just going to drag it down here. I also like to rename my layers, so I think I'm going to rename this layer to be Camera Raw. Oops. If I can spell correctly, there we go. Camera Raw. We'll name that one Camera Raw. We'll name this one to be Liquify, just so I know what I'm going to be doing on this layer. So I'm going to open this up into Liquify. So I just went to Filter and then Liquify, and it's going to open the Liquify panel here in just a moment, and we can kind of play around with that. So her hair was a little bit messy. She had a crown on her head, and it just didn't want to stay on her head. So we decided to take it off, but it had kind of messed up her hair a little bit. So I'm just going to, play around with giving her hair a little bit more volume in there. So we'll zoom in. And excuse me, and we are just going to slowly give her a little bit more volume in her hair here. And just doing the adjustments a little bit at a time will help as well. I might just bring that in a little bit, but we'll bring some of this hair out a little bit at a time here. Oops. So just to see if that's before and after is affecting her face at all, which it is not. All right, so we're gonna zoom back out. So if you hit P while you are in the liquify panel, it's going to show you the before and after, just like your preview. So that's what I was doing there. And we'll just kind of fluff out her dress even more. So it's a quite fluffy little dress, but we're just going to play around with it and really just make it very dramatic. Again, just a little bit at a time. And hit P again for that before and after. Wonderful. All right, and then I'm going to hit OK on that one. All right. So I really like that. I think that's so cute. So now I'm going to touch up her skin. So I'm going to have to flatten this layer. Now I've done a tutorial on how to do my basic frequency separation. If you are in the group, you actually have a free download in the files. So if you go to Mom Boss Photographers, in the group files, you're going to have a free frequency separation action in there. So you can also, if you want to make your own action, go to that tutorial that I've done on how to make it, and you'll be able to make your own. So I'm actually just going to go to my own actions here, and I'm going to press play on my basic frequency separation action. So when you play the action, it's going to tell you what you're going to be doing on each layer. So on the gray layer, you want to do all of your clone tools, spot healing, all that kind of stuff. And then with the blue layer, the blur layer, the one that's labeled blur layer, is where you're going to do the softening of the skin. So you're going to do the Gaussian blur on that one. So we'll hit continue and it'll play my frequency separation action. All right, so when you open this, you have your blur layer and your gray layer. So I always just start with the blur layer. I'm going to zoom in here. And we are going to use the lasso tool to just kind of make selections of the skin. You go to filter. Oh, sorry, you want to make sure that your feather, if I can show you, your feather is going to be at about 10 pixels, just to kind of smooth everything out even more. So we'll go blur, Gaussian blur, and I like to keep it around 7 for this, the radius around 7, and we'll hit OK. Now, once you've made that one blur selection, you can go in and you can hit Control or Command if you're on a Mac, Alt F, and it's going to redo that blur filter on there. So Control Alt F, Control Alt F, and just keep doing that over and over until you have every selection of her skin done. All right, and then the gray layer, like I said, you want to use your healing stamp tools. So you could use the heal brush, you could use the, what's this one called again? The patch tool, sorry, patch tool. You could even use gradient, whatever tool you like to use on skin. This is the layer that you're going to use those tools on. Oops. Sorry, I just got to go back into the history here. There we go. All right. So I'm seeing this little shine on her chin. I'm going to get rid of that. And just go in and get any little marks, anything that you want off there. I mean, her skin's pretty darn perfect. She's most children don't need too much of this, but you know, if you see any like bruises, marks, anything like that, it's good to get rid of those. All right, so I'll show you a few other little advanced things that we could do. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to make a copy of this gray layer. And instead of having it on linear light, sorry, is that what we had it on that one? Yeah. All right, so we made a copy, but what we're going to do this time is we're going to make a layer mask on the copy and invert that. So it's not going to show up. So you can see so far what it's done is just kind of blurred her skin and made it look very soft. So what we're going to do with this copy, this gray copy, is we're going to sharpen her eyes. So we're just going to zoom right in there. I usually put it at about 20 or 30%. Let's put it at 30 for now. If we need to lower it, we can. And with a white brush, we're just going to go in and paint on that layer mask, and it will sharpen up her eyes a bit. So we'll sharpen her eyes. We'll sharpen her mouth. Any little details that you want to have sharpened this one is a good one to do that. So as you can see, before and after, you know, I honestly think that with this one, you could go even more. So I'm going to go 40% with that one. All right. So that's before and after with the frequency separation. We'll zoom in so you can see her skin a little bit more here. Just like that. All right, so now I'm going to just flatten this. All right, so once I've got that flattened, I'm going to soften the edges even more with this image. So we'll just bring that down to the plus sign and make a copy. I'm going to call this soften edge. And with the square marquee tool, we're going to just select the edges of this image. Now, if you hit Shift, Control I, it's going to invert that selection. And we'll go up to select, and we're going to go to modify and feather this selection. Let me just bring that back over here. There we go. All right, so feather selection, I like to put it up pretty high, between 100 and 200%. So I think I'll do 150 for this. And then we will go back to filter. Once that selection is done, there we go. Filter, blur, and then Gaussian blur. And you want to have that up pretty high as well. You can always lower the opacity on your layer as well, which I think is what I'll do. So once I deselect this, we'll just see how it looks. We can bring the opacity down and just play around with it until you find what you like. So I'm gonna go like 40% with this. There, a nice and soft edge. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is make some light in here. Like we got some light coming in the background here, but I want to make a little bit more. So I'm going to make a new layer. Oh, sorry, I think I'll use the gradient. So I'll go back to my adjustments. We'll go gradient, and we'll make this radial. Now I'm going to select a kind of a darker, sorry, I'm going to select a pretty warm color, something that's in this image. So lighter than that, obviously, but maybe a little more on the orange side. Okay. And then we'll choose basically that same color, maybe even a little brighter around the edge. And we'll hit OK. I think I'll make this a little bigger. There we go. I have to go back into that. So when you're in this panel, you can move it around. So if you use your move tool, you can move it around. And we're just going to put it up pretty high here. And I'm going to put this onto screen, maybe? Screen or soft light. Soft light's not really showing up. So I'll put it on screen, but I will lower the opacity as well. And we're going to go on the mask here, and we're just going to, with a soft brush, so we want to make sure that the hardness is at 0. So with a soft brush, sorry, having issues. There we go. A large soft brush. I'm going to actually put it to about 50%, and we'll just paint it off of our subject here. Oh, a black brush. There we go. There. So I like the dreamy look of that. That looks really nice. All right, so then the next thing we want to do is work a little bit more on the highlights and shadows. So I'm going to do some dodging and burning. There's a few different ways you can do dodge and burn, but I like to use the curves panel. So I'll just go into curves. We're gonna bring the midtones up for 1 for the highlights, and invert this layer mask, Control I. And then another curves, And this time we'll bring the midtones down. And again, we will invert this, Control I. So now I'm going to name this one Dodge. And this one will be Burn. So now I'm just going to zoom in and basically just go around with my soft brush over the highlights on the Dodge one. So any highlights that you want highlighted, you can highlight her skin. Oh, you know what? I have the wrong brush on. So I just hit X to toggle between these two. Now I have my white brush and the highlights will show up here. Oh, and I have my brush on 50%, so let's make that 100. Now the closer in you get to all the details and everything, and the more it's going to look like a painting here. Just going to go in on her eye a little bit here as well. Maybe even each little finger. So the front of her dress is kind of highlighted here, and now I'm going to go through all the highlights on the skirt. You can even add in different highlights as well. Okay, and now I'm going to go into the burn, and we're just going to go into all the shadow parts on the image. Maybe even on the back of her arm here. So I'm just going to group these. So I'm going to select both layers and hit Control G to group them. And we'll just call this Dodge and Burn. And I just wanted to group them so I could turn them on and off at the same time and just see the difference here. Okay, so you could even go and do more of dodge and burn even on the background here. So on some of the really highlighted spots, I'm just going to go in with my brush and make them brighter. I could even I think I might put my brush down to 50% for the rest of this. And just kind of go over some of the highlights. And then with the burn, we'll do the same thing. So we'll go into the darker areas and just burn those up a bit more. And if this is too much for you, if you're not loving the effect, if you don't want it to be this dramatic, you can just turn the entire opacity down on the dodge and burn layer here. I think I'm really liking it, so I may just leave it at 100%. All right. And the next thing we're going to do is do a solid color layer, and we're going to make it white, and we're just going to put this to screen and turn the opacity down to like 10%, and we'll invert this. And I'm actually going to use this to enhance the light in her eyes, so we will just say eyes on here. And we'll zoom right in. And go to a very small, soft brush. I need to zoom in even more. And just paint that in a little bit in her eyes here. And we could probably bring that up a little bit more to like 20. I think also because I have my brush at 50%. There we go. So there, her eyes are more dramatic there. All right. So since she's looking at the camera, I mean, sometimes for these more fantasy princess ones, I add in certain things like butterflies or things like that. But since she's looking at the camera, I don't know if it's really necessary to add those in. But I will probably come back and add in something like that because that's what her mom wanted in the image. So I will be right back.